She was just the nanny. He was a cold-hearted CEO with a past full of secrets. One fateful night changed everything. As love begins to bloom, a ghost from the past returns, bringing scandal, lawsuits, and the threat of losing the child they both adore. Do they have the courage to protect their family, or will they be torn apart? Hannah Mitchell never imagined her life would be tied to marble-tiled hallways, crystal chandeliers, and dinners where no one spoke a word to each other. She was just a girl from Vermont, armed with a preschool education degree, a once broken heart, and a promise to herself, no matter where I am, I'll make sure kids feel safe. That promise had led her to the Bennett mansion, a place where everything was so perfect it felt cold. Jackson Bennett, the master of the house, was a towering figure in the tech world. He'd graced the cover of Forbes 3 times in 2 years. But if there were an award for Most Distant Father of the Year, he'd win that hands down too. She knew it from her very first day on the job. Mr. Bennett's schedule. He doesn't keep a family calendar, just a work one. Will Olivia have dinner with her dad? Probably not. She's used to eating with the nanny. Olivia, the 7-year-old with deep blue eyes like a frozen lake, was a miniature version of her father. Beautiful, quiet, and always keeping her distance. She didn't cry or whine, but she'd never truly smiled either. Every step Olivia took was light, as if she feared disturbing someone. Hannah felt her heart tighten that first afternoon when Olivia bowed her head in greeting and whispered, "Are you going to leave after a few weeks, like the last one?" There was something eerily silent about this house. The sound of the butler's leather shoes, the clink of dishes in the kitchen, and sometimes Olivia playing the piano alone in the music room. But there was never laughter. No good-night wishes. No warm embrace from a father. Jackson usually returned home after 11 p.m., gliding through the halls like a shadow, never stopping by his daughter's room. On the nights Hannah woke up in the middle of the night, she'd often see light spilling through from the crack under the downstairs office door, where he worked himself to exhaustion. She'd once wondered, does he even know his daughter hates warm milk without sugar? That Olivia's so afraid of the dark she keeps a nightlight on all night? But then she realized Jackson wasn't heartless. He'd just forgotten how to be a father. One time, as she passed his office by chance, Hannah overheard him on the phone. "I can't take today off. She has a nanny. I'm doing this for her, not for me." Maybe he believed that the meetings, the contracts, the growth figures were proof of a father's love. But Olivia didn't need a CEO. She needed a hug, a whispered "Daddy's here." And then something Hannah hadn't expected happened. Olivia started seeking her out. After just a few weeks, the little girl began to smile, to talk about school, to hug Hannah every morning. Olivia even developed a new habit, saving a piece of dessert from dinner for Dad, even though Dad never showed up. "Maybe he'll come home early today," Olivia would whisper each night before bed, like a tiny miracle she still believed. And Hannah would smile, tuck her in, and sit by the bed to read a short story. Every page, every tale, every soft breath lingered in the room like an unspoken whisper. Someone needs to be heard. Someone needs to be loved. The Bennett mansion remained as picturesque as ever, still quiet and flawless, but within that perfect space, cracks were beginning to form, and a little girl's blue eyes were opening a door to something none of the 3 of them were ready to face: a family. The chime of the clock echoed through the main hall like a gentle reminder. Night had settled in deep. The glow from the bedside lamp cast a warm, soft light, draping a golden sheen over the carpet, the curtains, and the tiny figure curled up under a thin blanket. Olivia was asleep, finally asleep. Hannah sat leaning against the headboard, her eyes half closed. In her hands was the Velveteen Rabbit, its final page just turned. Her voice still lingered in the air, soft as mist, as if each story she told wasn't just to lull someone else's daughter to sleep, but to soothe her own heart too. Olivia had drifted off at some point, her small head resting against Hannah's shoulder, her hand clutching the hem of Hannah's shirt as if afraid she'd vanish upon waking. "Dad said he'd come home early today." That was what Olivia had whispered before her eyes fluttered shut. Quietly, but Hannah heard it clearer than anything else. She didn't dare promise, nor could she bring herself to lie. She only brushed the girl's hair gently and said, "Let's wait a little longer, okay? If not, I'll dream for him instead." And so they waited in silence together, and like every night before, Olivia fell asleep and Jackson still hadn't come home. Until the faint sound of the front door lock turning broke the stillness. It was a small sound, but in the perfect quiet of this house, it rang out like thunder on an autumn day. Hannah's eyes snapped open. She thought she'd misheard, but then the bedroom door creaked open, a gust of night air slipping in, along with a tall figure. Jackson Bennett. He stood there in the dim, hazy light, tall, sharp, and polished, like he'd stepped out of a magazine cover. His coat was draped over his arm, his hair slightly tousled by the wind, and those smoky gray eyes, they landed on her. For the first few seconds, neither of them spoke. Both Hannah and Jackson froze. She quickly sat up straighter, careful not to wake Olivia. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Her sentence trailed off as Jackson suddenly raised a hand, signaling her to stop. But there was no anger in his eyes, no disappointment, no trace of his usual coldness, just something very still and very real, as if he were seeing something he'd missed for far too long. He stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze never leaving Olivia. Lying in the middle of the bed, her face peaceful for the first time after countless restless nights, her small hand still clung to Hannah, as if that was the only safe place in this vast world. Jackson took a deep breath. For the first time, he saw his daughter sleeping soundly. No crying in the night, no calling out in her dreams, no need for the sleep aids the psychologist had recommended. All it took was someone to hold her and read her a story. That was enough. "Does she always fall asleep like this with you?" His voice was low and quiet, as if he were speaking more to himself than to her. Hannah swallowed hard, then nodded slightly. "I just want her to feel like someone's there. That's all." Silence. He sat down on the edge of the bed. His hand hesitated, then gently touched his daughter's tiny one. Then he leaned down and kissed her forehead, ever so lightly. Hannah turned away, but not fast enough to hide the tear that slipped down her cheek. Not out of sadness, but because that moment was too beautiful, too fragile, and because she knew, from this moment on, nothing would be the same. The next morning, Hannah opened her eyes as the first rays of sunlight slipped through the curtain gaps, soft as a breath. It took her a few seconds to realize she was still lying in Olivia's wide bed, and that the little girl was no longer beside her. A flicker of panic rose, then faded as she spotted a neatly folded note on the bedside table. The handwriting was bold and slanted. "Had to leave early. Olivia's in her room, still asleep. We should talk. My office, 7 p.m. JB. Hannah clutched the note, her mind a tangle of threads. We should talk. In his office, 7 p.m. This was the first time Jackson had reached out directly, not a work reminder, not a request through the butler. He'd written it. He wanted to meet. And after last night, something had truly shifted. All day, the house seemed to hum with an invisible current. The staff no longer chatted as usual. The glances that brushed past Hannah carried a curiosity she couldn't ignore. She felt like she'd crossed a line, and the whole house knew it. Only Olivia remained unchanged. Or rather, she had changed, but in a way so gentle it was startling. She ate breakfast without a grimace. She read comics, then invited Hannah to play chess. She even laughed, a real laugh, full and tinkling like wind chimes. "Dad really came home, didn't he?" Olivia asked, her eyes sparkling. "Yes," Hannah replied, brushing the girl's hair softly. "And he even kissed your forehead." Olivia smiled, quiet, as if it were a treasure she'd been searching for all these years. 7 p.m. The heavy office door swung open silently. Hannah stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd imagined finding Jackson behind his desk, his face impassive and his voice distant as always. But he wasn't there. He was sitting by the fireplace, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, the firelight reflecting in his eyes, making them warmer than anything she'd ever seen in him. "You've made her laugh again." The words came without a greeting, without reproach, just a fact, raw, full of gratitude. "Olivia just needs someone to be there," Hannah replied softly, standing at an uncertain distance from him, "and I haven't been." His voice quieted, as if admitting a fault he'd never dared name. Jackson stood and walked to the window, where Manhattan glowed in the fading daylight. "I used to think keeping my distance was how I protected her. That if I didn't show weakness, I wouldn't hurt her." He turned back, his gaze meeting hers like a jolt of electricity. "But last night, seeing her sleep so peacefully in your arms, I knew I was wrong." For a few seconds, no one spoke. The air thickened, as if every unspoken word carried the weight of a lifetime. "You've given her something I couldn't." His voice caught, not from weakness, but because, for the first time, he let emotion live in his words. Hannah looked at him, long and steady. "You're Olivia's father. She needs you. I'm just the one who stays when you can't." She didn't say replacement, because no one could replace a father's love. But she knew this, too. She'd become something vital. To Olivia. And to him. Jackson stepped closer. The space between them shrank to just a few breaths. "And you?" he asked. "Do you want to be part of our world?" The question struck Hannah's heart like a wordless melody. No promises, no guarantees, just the truth. An opportunity. A door cracking open. She couldn't answer yet. But from that moment, everything changed. Olivia laughed more. Jackson joined them for breakfast. And Hannah, she began to fear the emotions growing inside her. This feeling, could it save them, or would it burn everything down? That Tuesday afternoon began like any other. Hannah helped Olivia tweak her papier-mâché volcano for the school science fair, and Jackson arrived on time. For the first time, he stood on the other side of the display table, smiling as Olivia rambled on about fake lava, his eyes, usually sharp and cold, soft as mist today. Hannah watched the father and daughter from a distance, a vague feeling blooming in her chest, something close to happiness. But then, the sound of high heels rang out, click-clack, deliberate and sharp as a blade slicing through the air. Everyone turned at once. Victoria Sinclair stepped in, as if she belonged there more than anyone else. A blazing red silk coat, blood-red lipstick, every step staged like a performance. The atmosphere shifted the moment she appeared, as if the lights grew colder and every eye in the room was drawn to her instinctively. "Jackson Bennett." Her voice dripped like honey poured into poisoned tea. "You've always known how to surprise people." Jackson's hand tightened slightly on Olivia's shoulder. "Victoria," he replied, his tone dry. "I didn't know you were back in the States." "Oh, Paris got boring. No one there was worth staying for." Her gaze slid over Hannah like an invisible knife. "And this is—" Victoria narrowed her eyes, feigning surprise. "Oh, right, the nanny. I've heard you're very dedicated, very close." No one laughed. Olivia grabbed Hannah's hand, squeezing tight. Her small voice was firm. "She's part of my family." Victoria froze for a single second, then flashed a queenly smile, the kind of smile that said she'd been insulted, but didn't care because she knew she'd win the final round. After the fair, the air in the car grew heavy. Olivia sat in the middle of the back seat, resting her head on Hannah, silent. Jackson didn't speak the whole drive, but his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel said everything he was thinking. Enemies never come alone. And Victoria, as Hannah feared, was never just an ex. That night, an unmarked envelope slipped under Hannah's door. Inside were photos, Hannah hugging a boy goodbye at a bus stop, wiping tears from a young mother's face on a porch, smiling brightly with an elderly couple as she left. Simple moments, but edited with sinister intent. Attached was a single handwritten note in black ink. Be smart and leave before these hit the front page. Don't let the Bennetts have another pathetic gold digger story. V. The room spun. Hannah sank to the floor, hands trembling, chest tight as if something invisible were choking her. Victoria knew how to strike, no force needed. Just the right insinuation at the right time was enough to destroy a relationship on the mend. Jackson sensed something was wrong when Hannah avoided him all the next day. She skipped breakfast, didn't reply to messages. When he finally stormed up to her room, the envelope lay open on the table, exposed, stark and dangerous, like an unloaded gun still capable of threatening an entire family. "You think I'd believe this garbage?" Jackson growled, tossing the photos to the floor. "The media only needs a spark to burn everything down, Jackson." Hannah's voice wavered but held steady. "I'm not scared for myself. I'm scared for Olivia. She doesn't deserve to live in the middle of an adult storm." And that's when Melissa, Olivia's biological mother, emerged, like a ghost from the past. A call came straight to the Bennett family lawyer's office announcing she was filing for custody. The reason? Unstable living environment, inappropriate emotional attachment to staff, psychological impact on the child. Victoria was behind it, obvious, ruthless, calculated. Jackson slammed his fist into the wall after hanging up. Blood trickled from his knuckles. He turned, eyes red. No longer the cold CEO, just a father, afraid. I let them get close, let them have a chance to tear apart what I'd just started to rebuild. He looked at Hannah. I promised I'd protect you, protect her. And now? Hannah stepped forward, touching his hand lightly. For the first time, not for Olivia's sake. There's still time. Her voice was strangely calm, but we have to truly become a family if we want to hold on to what matters most. A child's heart. The storm was coming, and none of them, Hannah, Jackson, or Olivia, could turn back now. In the luxurious yet frigid living room of the Bennett mansion, the air hung heavy as if tinged with the smoke of a fire about to ignite. Hannah sat at the dining table, her trembling hands clutching a court notice. The words printed on it were sharp, like daggers piercing her soul. Melissa Bennett has officially filed for custody of Olivia due to an unstable living environment, along with allegations of an improper relationship with caregiving staff. Each word hammered into Hannah's heart, making her feel as though she stood in the eye of an inescapable storm. She knew that, in the eyes of society and some of the Bennett family, she was just the nanny, a peripheral figure in this wealthy household, not truly part of it. Those cold accusations seemed to confirm that the genuine bond she shared with Olivia was nothing more than a meaningless relationship that Melissa was determined to dismantle at any cost. Meanwhile, just outside the room, the phone rang incessantly. Jackson Bennett, the usually stoic and formidable father, had just hung up, his face etched with fury and helplessness. He stepped into the room, his eyes burdened with worry and resolve, yet shadowed by profound pain. "Hannah, we don't have any other choice," Jackson said, his voice trembling between anger and regret. I've done everything I could, but Melissa says this environment is negatively affecting Olivia. The evidence they've presented, it only strengthens her case that our daughter needs a more stable home." Hannah felt each of his words like blows to her mind. She knew that, no matter how tumultuous her heart felt, this decision would never be easy, especially after all the love, all the hope that had bound her, Olivia, and even a piece of Jackson's heart over the past months. Before the large glass wall by the window, the golden lamplight illuminated Jackson's face, highlighting the firm lines laced with inner conflict. He sank to his knees, questioning whether he could protect his daughter simply by distancing himself from the woman he'd come to see as Olivia's source of comfort. But the harsh truth loomed. Olivia needs an environment free from scandal, where rumors about a relationship between a nanny and a daughter can't be twisted to harm her growth. Hannah rose from her chair and stepped silently onto the balcony. The night outside was stark, cold, and shrouded in fog, mirroring the chaos swirling within her. With every breath, she felt the weight of sorrow piling up, the fear of losing the child she'd come to love with every fragment of her soul. Yet in that very moment, she knew Jackson's decision would alter their lives forever. When she returned to the room, Jackson's gaze no longer shied away. He stood just a few steps away, his eyes filled with sadness, but resolute, like a man who'd fought countless internal battles. "Hannah," he said, his voice warm yet firm. "I've realized that if we let Melissa and these accusations continue, Olivia will suffer for the rest of her life. I was wrong to let things unfold naturally, to not protect her the way I wanted to." Hannah felt his words as both a veiled critique born of disappointment and a testament to a father's true love. "Are you telling me, the person you once valued, to take Olivia away from here, to let her live somewhere else, somewhere we can't control?" The anxiety in her voice was faint but compelling. Jackson bowed his head, his fingers clenching as if trying to hold onto the last shards of faith. "This isn't just about me, Hannah. It's about Olivia. She needs a safe place where genuine laughter isn't destroyed by schemes or rumors. And if we stay here, everything will only get worse." Hannah stood frozen in a long, endless moment. She remembered the late nights with Olivia, the fragile laughter, the times the girl found solace in her arms. She also recalled the hopeful moments when Jackson had slowly opened up, giving Olivia the natural smiles and warm hugs Hannah had longed to witness. But now, faced with the wall of brutal reality, she had to make a painful choice. "If we leave, will she be able to live better?" Hannah's voice broke, her words falling like raindrops on a porch roof. Jackson stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, gentle yet resolute. "I can't promise she won't face hardships, but I can promise that in a new place, we won't let rumors destroy our family's love. We'll start over, from the beginning." Outside the window, the night wind howled, carrying the unease of promises and pain. Hannah closed her eyes, and an image of Olivia flashed in her mind, her rare smile, her wide, innocent eyes. It was a vision of hope, of purity she couldn't ignore. After a long stretch of silence, she nodded gently, tears streaming down her face, but her gaze unwavering. "Okay, we'll leave. Find a place where Olivia can grow up in peace. Even if it costs me my entire soul, I'm willing." In that dark, somber night, two people stood side by side, sharing the burden of a decision neither wanted to face. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but in that moment they had only one choice left: to protect their daughter, to safeguard the hope of a future untainted by the shadows of the past. And beneath the faint moonlight, that decision echoed like a sacred vow: "We'll do whatever it takes for her to live happily." The wind still howled outside the glass as Jackson stood alone in the sealed meeting room on the 48th floor of Bennett Corp. Behind him, the large screen displayed the final pieces of evidence, slices of truth unveiled like pages from a silent war's journal. Victoria Sinclair was exposed. Secret transfers from anonymous accounts into the law firm representing Melissa. Emails laced with coercion, pressuring Melissa to re-emerge and fabricate a custody case for Olivia. And worst of all, photos of Victoria leaving a high-end restaurant with a tabloid reporter just days before the photo envelope slid under Hannah's door. It all fit together. The trap had been set, and now the trapper had fallen into her own web. "You thought I didn't know how to protect my family?" Jackson's voice was low but sharp as steel. "I left you behind for a reason, Victoria, but you came back like a toxic wind, not to win me, but to destroy anyone who made me happy." Victoria, standing across the conference table, no longer wore the calm mask of a woman in control. Her face stiffened, then crumbled in silence. She said nothing. There was no need. The truth was loud enough to drown out any defense. At the same moment, in a closed courtroom at Manhattan Family Court, Melissa appeared for the final hearing, exhausted, shifty, and visibly drunk. She failed the morning substance test. Her lawyer abandoned the case upon learning that all litigation costs had been funded by Victoria, with clear personal motives. The lawsuit was officially withdrawn. Custody was fully awarded to Jackson Bennett. That noon, in a room bathed in golden light, Jackson sat before the board of directors, men and women who'd once doubted him, pressured him to step back amid the scandal. On the table lay the dossier of evidence he'd gathered himself, every fact, every connection linking Victoria, Melissa, and the media. I won't apologize for choosing my daughter over numbers. My only regret is not doing it sooner. I built an empire on cold calculation. But if I let them use that same ruthlessness to take my daughter, I'd be no better than a king with a throne and no family. Silence blanketed the room. Then a voice broke through. The board is unanimous. Jackson Bennett is fully reinstated as CEO. As he left the building, the private phone in his pocket buzzed. It was the one Hannah had taken when she left with Olivia. A familiar number flashed on the screen, pulsing like a racing heartbeat. He answered. Hannah. Jackson? Her voice caught, trembling. Is it really over? Yeah. He smiled faintly, though tears welled in his eyes. We're safe now. I'm coming. I'm bringing you both home. The war was over, but Jackson's heart wasn't fully at peace yet. He knew the next journey wasn't about reclaiming his reputation. It was about retrieving the two final pieces to complete the picture of his life, Hannah and Olivia. The wooden cabin in the Vermont forest was blanketed in white snow. Late afternoon sunlight spilled over the pine trees, casting a deep golden hue like rippling honey. The wind blew gently, not biting, but carrying a familiar scent. Hannah stood by the window, cradling a mug of cocoa long gone cold, her eyes tracing the tire tracks etched into the thinning snow along the path leading into the woods. 2 weeks, 14 nights, 336 hours since that final phone call. I'm coming. Those 3 words replayed in her mind like a promise no one could be certain would hold. In the corner of the room, Olivia scribbled with crayons on a piece of cardboard. A messy but love-filled message. Welcome home, Daddy. To her, perhaps, it didn't matter how many lawyers, courtrooms, or accusations there'd been. As long as Daddy kept his word, everything would be okay again. 6:14 p.m. The crunch of gravel under tires. A familiar black SUV pulled up in front of the wooden porch. Olivia shot up, abandoning her crayons and half-finished drawing, and bolted out the door like a little gust of wind, her joyful shout piercing the air. Daddy! Jackson had barely stepped out of the car when he opened his arms, catching her in an embrace. He held his little girl close, as if every breath he'd brought back from the battlefield was meant to anchor this moment. I missed you so much, my princess. His voice broke. For the first time, Hannah saw that man cry. Not over a lost deal, not over a missed opportunity, but because he'd held on to the most important thing in his life. Then Jackson's eyes found her. Hannah stood there, fingers gripping the doorframe, lips trembling without words. She didn't run to him, didn't cry, didn't smile. She just waited. I believed you'd keep your word, she said softly as he approached, Olivia still clinging to his side. But I didn't expect it'd be this soon. Jackson lowered his head, his breath brushing lightly against her forehead. I should have come sooner. I should have put you and her above the whole world from the start. Hannah smiled, a tired smile but brimming with warmth. We've all learned to love, through our own scars, but I believe this time we can start again. From love, not from fear. That evening, the 3 of them sat on the sofa by the fireplace. No lavish feast, no fireworks, no grand declarations. Just the smell of freshly baked cookies, a soft blanket, and the animated movie Olivia picked. Though she fell asleep halfway through, slumped against Jackson's shoulder. Hannah tilted her head, resting it on his chest. "Will we go back tomorrow?" "Yes," Jackson replied, his fingers lacing with hers. "There's nothing left to run from, nothing left to hide. My family is right here." Outside, snow began to fall lightly, white, silent, gentle, as if the heavens themselves were smiling, witnessing three broken souls find each other in the longest winter. But this story, it isn't over, because life doesn't end with the first embrace, or close with a kiss among the pines. Tomorrow, when they return, the media will be waiting, unanswered questions, skeptical stares, and those who won't let go. They'll still be there, but now they're not afraid, because now they're no longer three lonely pieces. They're a family, and that's stronger than any storm.